forest may look inviting, but here is a sign. Entry forbidden. Danger. Formerly industrial land. And the reason for this are the tunnels and other potential dangers, sudden holes in the ground. A couple of years ago, somebody came walking in the woods here and he was missing for 3 days. He was found by the police, but the yellow signs are just about everywhere, and so with very good reason. It is forbidden to leave the visitors' trail. Even before the close of the Polish campaign in September 1939, the Supreme Military Command of the German Armed Forces started to look for suitable locations for the production of explosives. The choice fell here, to an area to the south of Bydgoszcz in Poland, which had been occupied in the first days of the war and which previously had been part of Germany. This forest is where the concrete remains of buildings, roads, fencing and other infrastructure can still be found. In this video you will see some of the abandoned buildings and the forest around it. Whilst I am talking, think of the thousands of victims and of their suffering using very dangerous chemicals and the ailments they may have got in an effort to produce weapons, or rather ammunition, for the Nazi war effort. Bydgoszcz had the advantage of a new north-south rail line which was designed to link the Polish coal mining areas in Silesia to the port of Gdynia, but which now served the aims of the Third Reich and linked it into the rail system of that country. Nearby there was a large German-speaking population who could provide some of the immediate workforce, and the forest could mask what was going on there to a certain degree. Best of all for the location, it was out of the range of Allied aircraft, and at the time it must have seemed as though the war against France and the United Kingdom was likely to last a long time. Dynamit AG was one of the largest arms producers in Europe. The company had been founded by Alfred Nobel, who had first patented dynamite in the 19th century. By 1939, the company was clearly working hand in hand with the Wehrmacht, as it would appear that it was that body that chose this location. The factory became known as DAG Bromberg, Bromberg being the German form of Bydgoszcz. The area was fenced off as early as November 1939. The perimeter fence was 35 kilometers in length and internally around 23 square kilometers was enclosed. As big as it was later enlarged. Construction of the initial buildings started in the spring of 1940, although it would be nearly 2 years before any explosives were produced. By the time this part of Poland was captured by the Red Army in January 1945, this factory occupied 35 square kilometers and had 360 kilometers of internal roads as well as 40 kilometers of railway lines. As large as this new factory was, it was not the biggest. There was another and even larger facility built at Kristianstad am Bober, today Krzyżkowice, following the border changes at the end of World War II. However, even less is known of the plant at Krzyszkowice. DAG also had major armaments factories in other locations, the largest of which were at Allendorf near Marburg, Hessisch-Lichtenau near Kassel, Krumel to the south of Hamburg, Claushall-Zellerfeld near Goslar, and in Forst, which is to the east of Cottbus, although the former factory, once more because of border changes, is now in Zaszelki, which is in Poland. This town is now split by the border. None of these factories were as large as DAG Bromberg. The infrastructure completed at Bydgoszcz included not just production and storage of finished products, but also supplying power, water and security. Indeed, it was a small town in itself. Housing was provided, which in the case of the executives and experts was of a high standard, for German overseers of a reasonable standard, and for slave labourers, barracks where people were piled on top of each other in inhuman conditions. For water, 25 wells were dug and distribution systems implemented. The disposal of wastewater presented a more complex problem, given that wastewater could be very acidic or from post-production, which was also a hazard, and therefore the two could not mix. Therefore, 3 separate disposal systems were needed to separate these hazards from normal sewage. 2 combined heat and power plants and 2 boiler houses were constructed in 1940, which were powered by coal, which was delivered directly from the mines in Silesia by rail. High pressure steam was required for denitration and nitric acid production, without which explosives could not be manufactured. Furthermore, the boiler houses had to heat the whole factory area in winter. Explosions had occurred in the past in a number of armaments plants belonging to Dynamit and other companies. Indeed, the brother of Alfred Nobel had been killed in an explosion. Therefore, buildings were constructed with this in mind, communicating via long tunnels with bends, kinks and right angles, which were designed to nullify the effects of an explosion. At Bydgoszcz, the land is not flat. Different parts of the production process therefore benefited from the hills. This made the manufacturing process a little more difficult, but certainly would have deadened the effect of a chain reaction. Other measures of this nature included blast walls of plaster or even glass, which would be destroyed quickly in the event of an explosion, allowing the force of the blast to escape. In such a case, 3 walls and the roof could be made of reinforced concrete, whilst the 4th wall was designed in such a way as to take the full force of the blast. Facilities such as escape tunnels, bunkers and shelters were provided for the workforce, although this would have made little difference, as in the event of an explosion no one would have known about it and had the chance to seek shelter. It would have happened instantaneously. Fresh water was supplied to locations where acid was a hazard, although once more, in the case of contamination or accidents, it was in such quantities unlikely to have been much assistance to the victim. Security at such a location was paramount, and the company regulations specified exactly what was permitted. The factory was divided into zones. Workers had access only to specific areas in which they worked or were authorized to visit. Knowledge was on a need-to-know basis. Those who knew the exact size, layout, and where everything was produced were very limited. Each worker had an identity card. There was also an absolute ban on bringing cigarettes, matches, rings, and even metal accessories to the plant, which was frequently combined with body searches. In addition, detailed regulations were posted in many places, usually by the entrance doors to individual facilities. These regulations could include such items as permissible amount of stock which could be held in any one location, the maximum number of people in the room or an area, etc. As mentioned earlier, this location was chosen as it was outside the range of any Allied planes. However, that situation changed with the invasion of the Soviet Union and later with the introduction of longer range aircraft, which from bases in the United Kingdom could theoretically reach and find Bydgoszcz. Therefore, as at other such locations, roofs were camouflaged by planting trees or grass, and netting was placed above some buildings and infrastructure. A decoy factory was built around 3 kilometers from the camp in 1944. From the air, this may have appeared like the armaments factories. As it happened, there was only one air attack on the area of the factory. This happened in July 1944 and caused next to no damage. In a future video, I shall examine why more effort was not given to bombing the plant. Alfred Nobel invented ballistite towards the end of the 19th century. Ballistite is a smokeless powder. The main product and speciality of DAG Bromberg was an improved version of smokeless powder. The advantage of smokeless powder in a military situation is clear. It allows one to fire without giving away one's position. The first line of smokeless powder became operational in 1942. Other products from the factory included nitrocellulose, nitroglycerin, and dinitrobenzene, lines for which were completed in 1943. In February 1944, new lines were ordered for blasting explosives and rocket powder, the latter to be used as missile fuel for the V weapons. Plans were also for an additional complex allowing for the production of sulfuric acid. However, this did not occur as the tide of war had turned against Nazi Germany when these plans were drawn up. Products left the factory in a ready-to-use state as explosives were filled into their casings on site. The casings were built in plants in Bydgoszcz. I have seen figures which suggest that by the time the plant was at its peak in the summer of 1944, that it was producing enough powder for 20 million rounds and 26,000 shells of a 75 to 88 millimeter caliber. Now let's just put this into context, as 20 million rounds sounds like a huge number. There were approximately 4 million Wehrmacht troops on the Eastern Front in 1944, which would mean that each day they got 5 rounds from DAG Bromberg. If we accept that this plant supplied 30% of the ammunition used on the Eastern Front, that is approximately 15 rounds per day per man. Now, of course, I accept that on most days, or just slight majority of days as far as 1944, no fighting was on. But in times of battle, then one's going to fire off that much ammunition, even with a bolt-action rifle, within a couple of minutes, if that. Then just imagine how much one machine gun would take. So, putting this into further context, let's think of how many people were needed to produce this ammunition. The plant could have employed as many as 40,000 people at any one time, with about 10,000 in direct production at all times. Now, I must stress that we don't really know exactly. When the plant was under construction and the initial startup phase, the workforce was recruited locally, with specialists being brought in by the company from other locations, as always happens with new industrial investments, even today. However, as the plant expanded, even a large town such as Bydgoszcz could not supply the labour required. German labourers from the labour service, the Reich Arbeitsdienst, were recruited. as volunteer workers became hard to find, not only from within the Reich and its annexed territories, but also from the occupied countries. Slave labour was found from street roundups and kidnapping. POWs were also forced to work here in breach of the Geneva Convention, which forbade the employment of captured troops in any form of war work. Italians made up a significant amount of the POWs. Around half of those employed at the plant were from Poland, followed by Germany, including locally recruited ethnic Germans, and then people from the Soviet Union, Czechoslovakia, Yugoslavia, France, and other countries. On the 15th of July 1944, 1,000 Hungarian Jewish women were sent to the factory from the Stutthof concentration camp. They worked on ammunition production and unloading at the nearby Bydgoszcz East railway station. Camps consisting of over 100 wooden barracks were set up in Bydgoszcz, whilst the camp for the Reich Labour Service volunteers and the penal camps were set up within the enclosed factory area. By the time of its evacuation, the company had 18 camps accommodating its workers. For many people, the work was extremely dangerous, although protective clothing was available made from either leather or asbestos. At the time, the danger of using asbestos was not known. Of course, as far as the Nazis were concerned, these people were expendable, although for the factory management, they would have seen the workers as being essential, even the slave workers. The number of deaths is not known, but probably runs into thousands. And we need to also consider those that contracted problems such as cancer and other ailments whilst they were there and had their lives cut short by these diseases. Not a great deal is known about the factory, as I really must stress, despite the large numbers of people who were here. All the documentation was removed, and although the plant was captured intact, it was dismantled and taken to the Soviet Union. However, it wasn't dismantled in one piece and set up somewhere else, as they did, for example, when industrial facilities were relocated in the Soviet Union following the Nazi invasion. In this case, it was just sent to various places, and in time, where things went was lost. Not even the number of transports is known, but a minimum figure is known, and that is 1,300 railway wagons which were used to take everything away, including things such as the railway lines, which one would have to say probably belonged to the state of Poland, as Bydgoszcz was in Poland, and whereas the Soviet Union did have some rights to take things from Germany, it didn't have the right to do that from a theoretically allied. So if you're interested in knowing any more, please see the videos I have done, such as on Alfred Nobel and the invention of dynamite. We have a visit to the museum, and I've done a biography of the director of the factory, and also will be doing a video on the resistance and the potential bombing of the factory. So thanks very much for watching. See the link as well below, which will give you more information from the website of the museum. And if nothing else, I hope that this may encourage you to find out more by visiting the museum, and you can see the link once more below. I upload every Friday at 8 in the evening at least, and for this year I aim to do around 100 videos. That means to say that not only on Fridays, but also at other times as well, there will be videos. So if you subscribe, you will know when videos are going to be produced. Sometimes I also upload on the anniversaries of events as well. Thanks for listening.